Hey, this is Nick Millivoy.
And this is Jason Shadrick.
And this is the 100 Guitarists podcast, where each week we are talking about one of the 100 guitar players that we think you should know. This week, we're lucky to have not only the opportunity to talk about one of the 100 guitar players we think you should know, who is Derek Trucks. We also have a guest, who is also one of the 100 guitar players we think you should know. Nels Cline is here to join us to talk about Derek.
Official friend of the pod.
Official friend of the pod. Yep. And official collaborator of Derek Trucks.
That's right. And he had some great insight into Derek's playing and Derek's style. And it's always great to talk to Nels. And you can see, here's a little spoiler, there might be an upcoming feature written by Nels in an upcoming issue.
That's right.
Not on Derek Trucks, though.
Not on Derek Trucks, but it's great to have Nels as part of the extended Premier Guitar family, and it's always great to talk to him.
That's right.
All right, so before we move on, we want to remind you that you can get at us, send us a message to 100, that's 100 guitarists at premierguitar.com, and you can text or leave us a voicemail at 319-423-9734.
All right, and today's episode is brought to you by Sweetwater. Now, we all know the name of our sales engineer, right? We all know Stuart's my guy, right? But we want to thank them for the support. That's why our cameras look so good. That's why we're sounding good. If you want to start your own podcast, you can head on over to Sweetwater. And so here, we're going to give a little podcast rig rundown here, Nick.
Yeah,
we're using DJI Osmo Pocket 3 cameras.
Mm-hmm.
We have Rodecaster Pro 2s for the sound.
So you can do fun.
You can do fun things like this.
Or become a monster.
We have the Shure SM7s, which I think are standard issue podcast mics.
We even got these contraptions that hook up the SM7B.
Yep.
Hold it here for us to look like pro podcasters.
So big thanks to Sweetwater for all the support. There's links down below to check out whatever gear you might need to get.
Thank you again to Sweetwater for sponsoring the podcast today. And now it's time to talk to Nels Cline about Derek Trucks' guitar playing. All right, so we are so happy to welcome Nels Cline, a previous subject here on the 100 Guitarist podcast.
That's right.
But
you're the first of the 100 to join us.
You're the first of the 100 to join us. That's right.
That's right.
Well, I'm honored. I have to say, humbled, slightly embarrassed, and rather awestruck that you did a show on yours truly, which I actually finally watched / listened to, and holy crap. Wow. I don't even know what to say, except thanks very much. And I'm amazed that, I was really interested to hear what your, like fave tunes and albums and stuff are. And I've never experienced anything like that. So, wow. Thank you. Nice to be here.
It was a very fun episode to put together. And
yeah.
So I don't know, obviously, Nels, we played a lot of phone calls on the episode. We had a lot of call-ins and people were very excited to talk to you, but we also got so many more that we didn't play. So you got a lot of listeners who are big Nels Cline fans.
That's kind of always amazing to me, especially in light of you guys talking about music other than Wilco music, because I do have this, is it an illusion, a delusion? This idea that very few people ever really hear my other stuff. So it's kind of heartwarming when people talk about the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, fun. I would say that, I'm not the only person I know that can say this, but I got into Wilco because you joined Wilco. So it's the opposite to what your expectation is.
I get told that periodically. Yeah. Not regularly, but yeah, I mean, it's been a wild ride.
So today we want to talk about Derek Trucks, and I just want to set this up because I've been familiar with Derek Trucks for a long time. I mean, going way back early in his career when he was a kid, he was like one of the 90s blues kids, right? Like he was one of those guys coming up that were blues prodigies, And so he's been in guitar magazines for decades now, and that's where I first heard of him. But I was never super tuned into like the Allman's universe, so I didn't know this side of him, and knew enough about him as a guitar journalist over the years, and had never seen him or anything. And you actually at a gig you and I were talking afterwards. It was after you came to a show that I played at Shapeshifter, and I think the next night you were going to play with Derek, and you were talking to me about your feelings about Derek Trucks. And that, it's like you telling me that is what clued me into like how much, even though I hadn't seen him, how deep his playing really is. And I went and looked for it and found it. But it's you spurred that. So I'm really glad that you're here, because I feel like you have the power to inspire people to like really, really get Derek Trucks. So not to put any pressure on you to tell people how to get Derek Trucks.
I mean,
but it worked for me.
Okay. I'm perplexed by what it would take to get Derek Trucks, because for me, the impact of his playing and his music is so profoundly immediate and so deep. It's somewhere in my maybe in my DNA or something. But unlike you, I'm not someone who is aware specifically of young Derek. I used to just hear about young Derek, and I wasn't being dismissive, but I wasn't curious. And the reason for that is kind of so like now I just finished Moon Unit Zappa's books, and I'm really kind of invested in the idea of deep trauma. It's phenomenal, by the way, but very upsetting on many levels. And I have been carrying around this trauma of relating to the death of Duane Allman, which for me signaled a kind of closing of a door for decades, pretty much on blues rock for me. Like I was just inconsolable, and I couldn't listen to the Allman Brothers band, and I really didn't listen to much music in that world for a really long time. And when Derek was coming up, I was completely on another planet. And then I also used to read things like he sounds like Duane reincarnated, and this really, really bothered me. And I'm sure it bothered him at the time. I don't even know how you really process something like that especially when you're that young and you're kind of to the manner born in a way, right? So it was later, probably, it's probably the album Revelator is where it started for me, which is pretty late, when you look at the trajectory of Derek's career, which is very long because it started so early. And friend of Wilco, friend of mine, Jim Scott, produced that record, and it won a Grammy. I remember seeing Jim because Wilco was at the Grammys to lose to the Foo Fighters again. And I ran into Jim, and of course they do the blues thing. It's not part of the big show, and now even like rock isn't really, but
right.
But he was really happy, and I was happy to see him. And I was on tour with Wilco, and I said, I've got to listen to this record. So I bought it. I don't remember where we were, and I listened to it on my laptop. I used to have a laptop that had a drive in it, and really lost my shit pretty seriously. And this was the song, and it's still, I find it devastating, the song Until You Remember on that record, which is a beautiful song and a beautifully voiced arrangement. And then there's Derek's playing. And so before the show, I listened to it yesterday. I revisited it. I hadn't heard it in a while, and it still just slays me. And I end up with tears in my eyes. And that's inexplicable to me. And I've never been the same, honestly, since hearing that record. And then, of course, hearing Derek play live. The first time I heard him play live, I was sitting in with the Allman Brothers band at the Beacon. So that was pretty bizarre. And that was
What year would that have been?
Oh God, I don't know.
Was that during their big anniversary run where they had a ton of guests?
Well, they always had a ton of guests.
Yeah.
Apparently, it was before their big last run, and I actually did get to hear the last ever Allman Brothers band set. They did a surprise third set, and Wilco was in town. It's all because of my friend EJ, who was at one time the director of the Allman Brothers Museum at the Big House in Macon, Georgia, that Warren became aware of me and invited me to play. And that's
nice.
how I met Derek.
Hmm.
Warren's just an incredible guy. Also an incredible slide player that having played it, well, I guess next to Derek all these years, people kind of don't talk about it enough, in my opinion. But to get back to Derek, he and I didn't really even speak during those, other than polite hellos during the Allman Brothers gigs, because he's very quiet and shy and retiring, and there's kind of a lot going on, a lot of guests, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really until I guess that they were playing at the Beacon to, basically replace the Allman Brothers run to a certain extent. And I got asked to sit in because I live in New York, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come and play?" That things got a little closer, and that was probably when I saw you at Shapeshifter, Nick, because. And I remember being side stage waiting to play. I don't even remember what we played. We probably played maybe one of their tunes, and maybe a couple, Derek and the Dominoes tune. I can't remember. I did it two or three times. I've sat in with them, and I can't remember exactly that first time what happened, except that I was like side stage where maybe Doyle or somebody was sitting in, and then Derek starts soloing, and I'm on deck, you know. And I just have tears in my eyes again. I don't know what's happening. And I have to like try to keep my shit together before I walk out there and wail and seem authoritative and, and look professional or something, There's just a massive impact, emotional and musical impact on me that is something that I don't think can be rationally explained.
Yeah.
It touches me on so many levels. But I think it is the combination of his obvious eloquence and his technique and the emotion in his playing, but also that it embraces something beyond just, even though he's a blues scholar for sure, as I've certainly become aware, it embraces also the Indian classical music and gospel worlds. So to me, he sounds like an Indian classical player came out of gospel church singing, but who happens to play guitar in a kind of blues, rhythm and blues band.
And one thing is, like, when Nick and I first started talking about this episode, I was pointing Nick to like the early Derek Trucks band albums, that had straight up jazz covers, like Coltrane tunes on it, And that was kind of the era when I first saw him, because it was about maybe 2000 or 2001. He was doing a tour with Eric Johnson. He was opening for Eric Johnson. And me and my guitar buddy's like, "Oh, it's gonna be great. We're gonna see Eric Johnson. Oh, cool. This kid we've kind of heard of, Derek Trucks, his band's gonna be opening." And Derek Truck comes out and just lights the place on fire.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably, on stage probably didn't take two steps one way or another the whole time. He stood right there. They played, and just the force and the energy that comes out of him. And that was like at maybe the Vic in Chicago or something. And I've seen him in amphitheaters and stuff. And that force, that energy that comes out when he really starts laying into it is like very few guitar players I've seen puts out that kind of force when they play. That's like all time elite level stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's at the risk of sounding, I don't want to sound trite or cliche, but it's magical what he can do. And also it's the feeling that he has, like why he does what he does, because I think he's doing what he's doing to really bridge gaps and bring people together and inspire in a way that's pretty much universal, I would think, kind of palpably so for me. And then he's touching on all these, I guess we would kind of call them some kind of traditions or whatever. But I mean, just the fact, okay, I think the first time we ever chatted was at Locken Festival, and that's the first time I heard the band live. Wilco was there playing, and they were playing, and our bassist John Steerett was talking to Derek and Susan, and I just kind of walked up there tentatively, and we all started chatting, and they heard us, and I heard them, and it was really, really cool. But their whole trajectory as a band aesthetically reminded me of so many things that I love so deeply. And besides the Allman Brothers band, and besides, various blues aspects with, like, Susan's, she's steeped in the blues too,
Oh,
and
yeah.
she's a great guitar player. Uh, but it also reminded me of all the stuff that I loved when I was a teenager, like Mad Dogs and Englishmen, Joe Cocker, and all the whole Leon Russell world,
Oh
and
yeah, totally.
just a whole bunch of stuff. So for me, this was it was inspiring, but it was also just touched my soul.
So both of you guys mentioned records where you've heard Derek and it moved you. And I would say that my experience, as far as like getting Derek or whatever that I mentioned before, it's like I could listen to the record and I could vibe on it. Like I could hear it and I could get that this is this phenomenal guitar player. But I think it wasn't. I think at the time that I heard that stuff, while it is related to lots of blues rock stuff that I like, it's like maybe when I first heard Tedeschi Trucks and his stuff, more his stuff before that, I just was in this weirdo avant-garde space that it's like that stuff wasn't. I could hear that this is a master of like playing, but it wasn't something that I kept coming back to. And then eventually, I think after you and I talked, I went on a trip of like watching videos, and then I realized like there's this other thing that maybe is conveyed live.
Right.
But then for me, I just saw him play for the first time at King's Theater in Brooklyn. I think it was 2 months ago, something like that. And that was like the final step in my process. Like I already knew going to that, like I got it by then. I knew that he was masterful, but I knew that before we could actually talk about Derek Trucks, like I need to go see him and experience it and feel it and see, because you're not the only person who's told me that Derek has brought them to tears. And I'm like, this is this thing that people say about this guy that seems so this is like a specific thing. He's channeling something that I need to feel. And I gotta say, seeing him in person and feeling that sound and just like the way that he actually commands the stage when he plays, and like you said, Jason, it's like he barely moves, he's just there, and then it's his sound is doing all the work. It was a profound experience. I did find the thing that I was looking for.
Oh, and the one thing we like to talk about, Nels, sometimes is maybe pointing people to certain songs. I know you mentioned that one on Revelator, or even sometimes certain videos. And for me, one of the literally all-time greatest guitar solos I've ever heard is that clip of him sitting next to John Mayer and B.B. King at the Hollywood Bowl. Have you seen that one? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I have not. I've heard about it. There was some, crazy backstory to that whole experience that I'm not privy to, but I know it was potentially like some of these things that Derek's done with BB there and like in the White House and all that stuff. That stuff gets weird sometimes.
Yeah, and he starts playing this solo in A flat, and he's tuned to open E. He starts playing this blues in A flat. That was incredible, and it literally left BB King like speechless. And John Mayer, I think you can just see on his face, it's like you're not going to get better than that.
I'll check this out. Well, you know that Susan sang with BB, so I
Yeah.
mean, so he was, I'm sure, aware of Derek for a while because of all
Yeah.
those Crossroads gigs and all that stuff.
But that to
none
me
of
is
which I was
one.
following.
That to me is one solo just one of the all-time greatest guitar solos that I've
going to
ever heard.
investigate.
So something that we can experience, that you have experienced playing with Derek, and you already mentioned sitting in with the Allmans and Tedeschi Trucks, But there's also one of my favorite videos of the two of you guys together is him sitting in with Wilco playing Impossible Germany.
Yeah.
Was that happened once, right? Is that?
Yeah. Certainly he's the only person that's ever sat in on Impossible Germany, and it was all my idea, I have to confess. Wilco was in St. Augustine, and I overheard somebody, because what do I know about Florida geography? Very little apparently. So somebody mentioned, I overheard in the production office, somebody talking about how close we were to Jacksonville. And I was like, wait, what? Yeah, it's like, 20-minute drive or whatever. And so I immediately texted Derek and Susan. I said, hey, we're going to be in town tomorrow. Do you have any interest in coming down? And Derek wrote back saying that Susan was out of town, but he'd love to come. And of course, then I was perhaps predictably writing, well, if you want to bring a guitar, and perhaps not surprisingly, he wrote, yeah, I'll come and play. What should I do? And I'd thought about this. This wasn't even the night before. This was days before, now that I think about it, because I tossed and turned, like, what can Derek and I do in Wilco repertoire land where we can do our thing, which is really play off of each other and get into this conversation that's, extremely rewarding and fun. And I had like a couple of ideas, and then one evening, probably in my bunk, bing, light bulb, Impossible Germany. And so I just tossed it out there. I didn't ask Jeff. It seemed like the only thing, so I suggested it. He said he didn't know the song, so he'd listen to it. And so when I saw Jeff in St. Augustine backstage, Derek was coming to pick me up and take me to their house and show me his studio and stuff, like all these things that I've really been excited to do someday, but never thought would happen. And so I saw Jeff backstage right before he came to get me. And I guess we should add, perhaps obviously, that he's an extremely lovely gentleman. So, and I said, Jeff, I got the idea for Derek. And he said, what? And I said, Impossible Germany. And he had this really kind of frozen grin on his face, where he just kind of stopped him in his tracks. And he said, whoa, does he know it? And I said, he's working on it right now. And he wrote, a great song and blah, blah, blah. And then we listened to it in his car on the way back, I'm driving back. And then he and I kind of played through it, the two of us. And then we always do this kind of warm up jam, kind of practice before we play in Wilco, little room set up, kind of the same way Tedeschi Trucks Band does. They have little amps. They get together for the show. They play songs. They go over details that might need to be gone over, play cover songs, whatever we're doing. It's really fun. And so we did it, and sounded good. Derek, very affable, very relaxed, and we went for it, and yeah, there are some YouTube clips, and it was probably the first time ever that I got up the next day and said, I hope there's some YouTube clips of that, because I got to see how it came out. I have regret that I somehow bumped the tone knob on my Klon Centaur. It's too trebly, but such is life. It's like that happens. My tone's pretty egregious in a way, but that's life.
Well, from somebody who's a listener and not one of the players in that video, I can tell you, I've listened to that video. I've listened to those clips and thought that they were perfect clips. So,
well, I have to say that playing with Derek is an extremely rewarding and fun and very natural experience for me. And by natural, I mean it doesn't freak me out. I just feel happy when and we're listening. One of the times, I think maybe the second time I played with them at the Beacon, with Tedeschi Trucks Band at the Beacon, was after Signs was out. And we played, oh God, like, what's the name of that song? It's the really tough Shame. We played Shame. It's a really tough rocker. and we did a really long intro to something, and he started playing Lonnie's Lament, you know, Coltrane, and I just thought, whoa, you know. And Susan smiling the whole time, and you know, it was just one of those really incredible things. And I had played, like, the first time Tim Lefebvre was still in the band, the first time I played with them. And Tim is well known in New York for his jazz identity, his jazz abilities, you know, and he was, you know, really crushing it on bass. And he got really happy about the music and started writing to me. And it's just, and I played these, you know, complete last waltz gigs. Is how I met a lot of people that I now play with periodically, like Scott Metzger, for example, a great guitar player and now a great friend. But Alicia Shakur is one of the singers, and she was on these gigs with Scott, and these complete last waltz gigs. So there are already people I knew in the band in a way. So it's just this big friendly, really, really kind of like deep but relaxed kind of experience, and I love it. I love that vibe, you know, and I think it emanates from Derek and Susan in a kind of very organic way. And Derek's running the show. I mean, as far as musical direction, you can see he does, like, his big move of the night is a guitar neck.
Yeah.
Like that, you know what I mean? And that's a cue, or he just turns around like halfway, and you can see all everyone's antennae just extend, and they don't know what to do. You know, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So I would say about maybe 10 years ago, I was in New York filming some rig rundowns, and it was during the Beacon run. It was in March during the Beacon run, and Warren's Tech reached out to me and said, "Hey, why don't you guys come by the show?" And we went by, and I met Bobby and Ryan, their guitar techs, Tedeschi Trucks' guitar techs, and I got to play a little bit on Derek's guitar, on his SG, and I couldn't believe how low of action he has.
I think you can tell by the way he uses his slide that he's pressing down all the way down, but there's no heavy effort there. It has to be. And that's really interesting, right?
Yeah, that like blew my mind, because I just thought of, you know, I think slide guitar, I think heavy strings, you know, depending on what tuning you're using, maybe you're tuning down, maybe it's open E where you're tuning up a little bit, and fairly high action, so that way you don't hear the clank of the frets.
Right.
And I was just curious if you ever had, well, you kind of mentioned you ever had the experience of picking up his guitar and seeing what his setup is, you know.
I've never touched any of his guitars.
Oh wow.
I didn't feel like it was verboten, but it just yeah. He only tours, I think, with like 3 guitars, and at first it was just the 2 SGs, but then he had like a K or a harmony or something, you know, for a different kind of sound and maybe a different tuning. He's playing slide on one song. And that sounded really cool, but I didn't look at it. I didn't touch it either.
Well, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, he just handed me the guitar, and I was like, oh, man. And it felt like, I think he had 11s on there, but it felt like a normal, like, setup. There was no secret sauce to his setup. It seemed like, it just seemed like that touch he has is just, you know, what sets everything apart.
Well, that and his right hand, the way he's obviously able to mute while he's really banging away, you know, very specifically isolating strings, and you know, you look at his hand, you know, he's like really, like, sometimes he's doing this really hard, and it's still extremely specific, you know, very articulate.
What I think the best video I've seen that illustrates that point, Nels, is the video of him playing Layla at Lock-In. And when he plays the intro riff up high, you see his hand literally hitting the guitar like this.
Yeah.
But that riff comes out so precise and so clean and so powerful. Like, that to me is like where the tone is coming from, how he's attacking that string.
Yep.
So I want to kind of wrap up here, Nick, and maybe you could jump into it. I want to, each of us, let's pick, if we're to slide somebody an album from Derek's discography, and I'm going to spoil it right now, I'm not going to pick a Tedeschi Trucks or Derek Trucks Band album. There's one album in his discography that I think really shows an interesting side of him. If you were to
Mm.
slide somebody one record with Derek, which would it be? I'll let you go first, Nels.
Well, I must start with the caveat that I am no expert on Derek's discography. I haven't heard every Derek thing.
Mhm.
I investigated, perhaps much like Nick, the Derek Trucks band, and it was kind of in this zone that was not quite jazz enough or blues enough for me, and I was kind of not as completely blown away by that as I am by Tedeschi Trucks band. I don't know why. Certainly the playing is amazing. So I haven't heard all those records, honestly. And I really love Revelator. And but I also have to say, uh, the most recent record,
Mhm.
there's four.
I Am the Moon.
I Am the Moon. There's four of those, and I get zeroed in on specific songs, maybe more than saying like this is the one I'm going to slide to you. So I just play, and I think it's the second record that ends with "Hold That Line."
Mm.
"Hold That Line" for me, just as a song, and there's beautiful raga, like if you will, slide playing on it. This song got me through the pandemic. This song got me through a lot of shit. It's just a beautiful song. So I'm just going to have to say whatever I Am the Moon album 2
Yep.
or whatever,
Album
just
2,
for Hold That
Ascension.
Line. And there's plenty of good songs there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, I think Revelator is a justifiably great record. I mean, Grammy Award winning record, because it's got some, besides like Midnight in Harlem and all these songs that people really recognize from their repertoire. And it's got, Until You Remember on it.
Yeah.
Which I, can't get enough of that. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of wimping out.
No,
the
that
question.
totally works. That totally works. Nick,
I'm going to
what do you
wimp
got?
out even more.
Oh, boy.
Because given my experience that I explained, I think for me, I'm not as much of an album guy, an album listener, as the live videos. And unfortunately, like for me, it's like the last video that I've seen is always my favorite. Like he just I feel like every video of Derek playing is consistently amazing. So this morning I listened to a 2011 video of The Sky Is Crying, of him playing Sky Is Crying with the Almonds, and
Oh,
Warren plays this unbelievable solo. Sounds amazing, and it's like the first half of this, like I think it's 10 or 12 minutes long. I don't have it in front of me. It's the Warren show, and he's doing it, and then Derek just opens up, and it, like while I was watching that, it's like I really did have the feeling it was like this is the best thing. Like I've had that
I'm making
experience
a
so
note
many
of
times.
this.
Oh, I'll send you the link. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just like, this is the best thing. This is the best guitar playing. So I have that experience every time I listen to him. I don't think I'm discerning enough to say like something is better than the other at this point. That's the last one I saw. And today, that is my favorite recording of Derek Trucks.
All right. I will go totally left to center with y'all. I'm going to pick one album and then one track. So the album I'm going to pick is from 2001. It's called Project Z. Have you guys heard of this record?
No.
Okay. So the band on the record is Jimmy Herring, Jeff Sipe, Derek Trucks, and Ricky Keller on bass, with Colonel Bruce Hampton in there too.
Nice.
And it's largely improvised, from my understanding. A lot of little short, there's tracks in there called Guitar Argument 2, Guitar Argument 3, and it's a lot of real back and forth.
Very Colonel Bruce,
right? And it's a lot of real back and forth interplay between Jimmy and Derek, who I think have a real special connection, because they're literal family. And so that to me is one record that it's not only an incredible showcase for Derek, I think it's an incredible showcase for Jimmy as well.
Nice. I'm going to write it down here.
Yeah,
and the other sneaky track, Derek's not on the whole album, but he's on a couple tracks, is the McCoy Tyner album called Guitar.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that one is
That's a cool record.
That's a great record. You know, not only for Derek stuff, but for Zell, Mark Rebo, Schofield, Bale Flex on it, and the rhythm section is Ron Carter and Jack DeJohnette.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of them, but those two records I would point people to really hear, and really two different sides. You know, Project Z is way more experimental and off the wall and weird, and the McCoy one is hearing, you know, a little bit of Derek made a straight ahead jazz record, you know, at some point, which I hope someday he still does. I hope someday he does, you know, aim to do that.
Well, see, now you're making me think about that, and it's not probably in any way definitive. The track "These Walls" on Revelator, where Derek's playing sounds like Square Neck Dobro, except when you first hear it, you think like, "Wow, who's that incredible sarod player?"
Right?
Yeah, and so that's pretty inspiring. In fact, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, and he's one of the few players I've heard that inspires me to play an open E without a slide. You know, because he's so good at that.
Well, yeah, like the long instrumental at the end of the first "I Am the Moon" record. It begins with a P. It's a one word.
Oh, not Pascagoula, but I know what you're talking about. Passaquan.
Passaquan, man, come on.
Yeah,
it's like he's playing. There's no slide on that, you know, and it's kind of like a cross between Mountain Jam and Third Stone from the Sun, like as a composition to me. That's a really rewarding track.
Incredible.
That helped me through a lot of shit too.
Man.
Wait, I swore. I'm sorry.
That's all right. All right, Nels, thank you again so much for coming to hang with us. What do you have coming up later this year that people can look out for?
Well, that'll be Wilco tour. You know, at that point, I will have probably already played Big Ears with the Singers and Concentric Quartet, and played with Joe Russo and John Medeski and Larry Oakes. I can't. So that's Wilco tour time.
All right.
Come out and hear Wilco. I think a lot of it's going to be in Europe. That's summer anyway. All right. Thank you,
Nels. Thank you so much for talking about Derek with us.
Thank you so much.
Derek rules. What can you do?
That's right.
That's the way it goes.
All right. So that was our talk with Nels Cline about Derek trucks. And now I magically appeared. The Derek trucks. Focus in on that.
I think it's upside down.
Signature slide right there.
Do you sound like Derek when you play it?
Exactly like it.
Do you have an SG and an Alessandro amp? Right there.
There's the
SG. There's the SG. Yeah.
Boom.
Well, now you need an Alessandro amp. Actually.
Alessandro amp, and that's all I need. That's literally it. I'm 66.6% of the way there, I guess.
That's right.
So thanks again to Nels for joining us. If you want to get at us, you can email us at 100guitarists@premierguitar.com or call or text at 319-423-9734.
And thanks again to Sweetwater for all the awesome support and all the awesome gear.
There we go. All the links are below, and we'll see y'all next time.
See you next week.